information what to do next. We have a hotline in our consulate for helping and also consult to the consulate what they have to do, especially for Indonesian citizen. But for the US or Indonesian American, of course, they have to report to the office in America itself. There is another case also in uh, in 2019. This is in where is it, Arvin? In Atlanta. Is it in Atlanta? The first one in Georgia, okay, and then the second one is the maid in Florida. And then so what we are doing, yeah, we give them shelter in the consulate. Luckily, we have also 2 rooms for the shelter for those who are experience domestic violence. The second one, we do communication with their family in Indonesia. And then also we facilitate if they want to go home to Indonesia. We also bring them and facilitate and take the victim to the hospital or to the doctor. And also we advise them to give a legal consultancy, and we give a recommendation for a family lawyer to accompany and also to help during the court. So that's what we are doing in the consulate. We also have a hotline number, our hotline number for those Indonesian who are berapa nomornya hotline? Okay, the hotline number of the consulate to be contacted is 346-932-7284. Right. So that's it what I can share. But mind you again that domestic violence is not only for women, but also for men. And what you have to do then, beside calling the consulate, you can also report to 911. And you can also go to the hospital. Don't forget to take photos because that can be an evidence for you. And then also the police usually will ask the chronology of the case and also the supporting document. That's all. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Now I give back to a moderator. Maitri, please. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you, Ibu Nana. So everybody can hear your English is very wonderful and very clear explanation. And also for all of the guests or the participants, you can type your questions and our team will take a look about it. And we're gonna go to the second speaker, which is my a professor too from University of Indonesia. So Dr. Lidwina Inge Nur Cahyo, she's anthropology, gender and law studies from University of Indonesia. From 2018 until present, she is the manager of community engagement unit in faculty law in University of Indonesia. And also she's the chief of gender studies postgraduate program at the School of Strategic and Global Studies at University of Indonesia. And one of the things that is not on her bio, actually, she was one of the assistant to Professor Tapiomas, which is actually my aunt. And she's one of the founder of Indonesian woman with the law background. So maybe she can share more about it, her experience and how Indonesian can deal with the domestic violence from perspective anthropologists and also law as well. So without further ado, I welcome and the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Mbak Metrini. Yeah, I will call everybody sorry, I will call Mbak Buria and Mbak Metrini as Mbak. It means sister. Uh, it's it's very apa? It's common language in Indonesia that if you call a woman as a Mbak, it means that you respect and also think that she's the close have a close relation with you. So I only want to share some of my findings at the field about domestic violence. Uh, as we know that the domestic violence is quite a very armed uh, action that can cause some problem not only for women but also for the young male. So yeah, could you continue the slide, please? Okay. Boleh, ya. So, okay. In this slide, we can see the chairs. Why I put the picture of the chairs? Actually, when you visit court, you will find this. That's only a chair, but if they can speak, they will tell you the sadness or many stories about women victim, especially domestic violence victim, how the women struggle for justice, or how the family of the women crying for help, or in other hand the family of the perpetrator said that, oh, I cannot imagine that he could do that, or it's impossible that he can do that. Okay, so yeah, that's only an illustration that can describe uh, uh, society or family perspective about the domestic violence. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, yeah. Actually, the UN have a declaration of elimination on violence against women in 1993 that recognizing that violence against women is a manifestation of historically unequal power relations between men and women, which have led to domination over and discrimination against women by men, and to the prevention of the full advancement of women as one of the crucial social mechanisms by which women are forced into a subordinate position compared with men. So it tends or it refers to unequal power relations between men and women. Okay, next slide, please. As we know, domestic violence in some of Indonesian act or government rules, it says that domestic violence is a one form of such violence against women in domestic violence. There are some various forms of domestic violence as physics, psychology, sexual, and economic. For example, abandonment, and all of those forms are conducted in order to control a spouse, your partner, or a child, or other family member who who is living in the same household. So it means that all of the action of domestic violence tend to control the victims. Yeah. And in the rapidly developing condition of information technology, domestic violence sometimes can also take the form of technology facilitated sexual violence. For It's a part of control also that you push your spouse or your partner to do some sexual act, and you make a film, or you share or distribute the a picture or the a film to internet only for push them to do what you want her or him to do. And also, domestic violence can be take a form as a malicious distribution, including porn revenge. Next slide, please. Okay, based on Republic of Indonesia Act number 23, year 2004, in Article 1, it said that domestic violence is every deeds of a person, especially women, which can make the victim suffer physically, sexually, psychologically, and or financially, including deprivation of independence against the law in the sphere of the household. So it means that not only domestic violence is not the victim of domestic violence is not only your partner, your children, but also can be the people that live with you in the same household. Uh, Ibu Nana have gave an explain that gave an examples about the case that the victim is the domestic worker, ya Bu. Nah, it's that's a part of domestic violence also.
Yes, Bu.
Silakan. Yeah. Okay, for next slide, please. Okay. This is some of international instruments which protect women and children's rights. We have Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, which Ibu Tapi Omas Ihromi, Ibu Metrini's own, working to socialization this convention in Indonesia. And we also thank to her that we also have the commission, Indonesian Commission for CEDAW socialization. And also we have a convention on the rights of the child. And these two international instruments actually used as the base for other government rules in Indonesia to protect women and children's rights. Why? Because domestic violence actually against women and children and neglect the dignity of women and children. So yeah, these international instruments protect the vulnerable, the both of vulnerable groups. Next slide, please. Okay, actually, who's the victim of domestic violence and who's the perpetrator? Most of the domestic violence victims are women and children, but sometimes perpetrators are not only adult males. Sometimes you can find the case that elderly could be the perpetrator, or even the caregiver also could potentially become perpetrators. The relationship between the victim and the perpetrator can be based on not only on marital relationship or spouse, but also as parents, siblings, or even caregiver with the person that given the service. Children or teens have the potential to be perpetrators also, or otherwise they can be the victims of household workers. Actually, anyone who has a financial, emotional, social, and psychological dependence within a household, they can be potential to become as violence victims. Next slide, please. Okay, some of the factors that may cause domestic violence. We found these factors when we do the uh, when we do the uh, the research. Yeah, sometimes the perpetrator has a psychiatric problems, or they have a social pressure that in Indonesia one of kind of social pressure. For example, when you visit your parents' house and they found that you don't you haven't a child, gitu ya, even you get married for 10 years, they will be said anything that push you to have a child. So it's kind of a pressure, and sometimes in Indonesia the husband put the blame on his wife, gitu ya. It's a part of social pressure, and not only not only your parents that put the blame on you, but sometimes your neighbor also uh, gossiping you that, yeah, why they get married about 10 years and they don't have any child right now. Okay, that's kind of social pressure that common happen in Indonesia. And the next factor is a high economic dependency of the victim. Sometimes it's just like a vicious circle. The perpetrator asks the wife not to go outside or not to work, gitu ya, and then the wife highly dependent to the perpetrator or to the husband, and then the violence happens, but unfortunately the wife can have no power again to go out for work or to support herself. Other factors is the will or need to control spouse, child, or other person under his authority. It based on unequal power relations. And also we have cultural factors. These cultural factors where violence is considered normal, even if it occurs in the family, is considered as a part of disciplining children and women or your domestic worker in the household. uh, these cultural factors. Okay, I found this the statement that the statement from some people about the domestic violence is a part of culture. When we visit when we visit East Indonesia, they explain that ibu, it's okay when we put our hand into to our wife or to our children. That's not a violence. Oh, we are so surprised and we are so shocked. Oh, Bapak, but that's a violence when you beat your when you beat your wife or your when you beat your children. No, Ibu, it's a kind of discipline. So it means that if you beat somebody, they will only see that as a discipline action. But we don't agree with that. Why? Because you can do discipline not only by beating people. Don't beat, because it's a violence. Simple. You just say that, okay, you cannot do that, but please uh, do this. You can get a small talk with your children or with your wife, not beaten them. Okay, next. Not all victims. Okay, actually, after violence happen, not all victims are willing to report. Why? Okay, because victims does not realize that she or he is a crime victim. It can be happen because, as I explained before, some people think that the violence is only a part of discipline. So they think that's not a violence. Okay. And next, victim have a very high sense. Sorry, can you back yeah, victim have a very high sense of dependence on the perpetrator. And also there are cultural and religious values that force victims to maintain the marriage or keep staying in the household. Uh, yeah, because for example, there is social values that said that if you divorce your husband, it's a sin by the church, for example. Okay, And next, the victims believe in the promise of the perpetrators. The perpetrators said that, oh yeah, I have a commitment to change myself. I love you. So the victims believe, and then, oh okay, bear the I can bear the violence because he wants to change. The victims believe in the promise of the perpetrators. Next slide, please. Other factors other factors are victims have limited access to knowledge about their rights and obligations in law. Uh, Also, victims sometimes don't want to deal with the law because I don't know, in Indonesia sometimes people think that finish their problem in the court will take more will take time or will spend a lot of money because of the mechanism of the law. And other factors, victims don't understand their rights related to legal assistance. They don't understand that they can access the legal aid. I don't know, in USA I think the legal aid is provide for free ya, Bu Ria ya. But in Indonesia, it's okay. Some legal aid, some NGO that provide legal aid for free, but the but sometimes the society don't get the information, so they don't know who will be contacted first, how they can will be protected, or what evidence that must be prepared. Also, victims are afraid of the complicated and intimidatively legal language. Yeah, not only the women victim, but sometimes when we who uh, go to the university, even we also think that some act have a very complicated language. It's hard to understand the some idiom in the legal or in the uh, rules. Okay, and victims are afraid of the legal enforcers' attitudes, or they have bad images about the police or about the judge. Yeah, it happens in Indonesia. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, some victims are not willing to report because they receive the threats from the perpetrators or the perpetrators' families. Itu ya. Both the threats can be in the physical violence or emotional blackmail. Also, the victims are not willing to report because of the social pressure of the community and family. For example, in Indonesia, in some area, being a widow, being a widow means that you should be prepared to have or to receive the mocking from the society. Uh, Sometimes the society said negative things to the widow. The next factors is the criminal justice system is still not conducive in handling domestic violence cases. Sometimes in the process in the police, in Indonesia context ya, in the police, the victim and the perpetrator, uh, they sit in the same room, or sometimes the police uh, cross-check them by making them sit uh, uh, in the same table. So yeah, how can you explain your case when you said when you see your husband that have beaten you uh, last night, or yeah, it's hard for you to tell when you see the people that you scare of. And also in Indonesia context, domestic violence cases are covered in many divorce cases. Women sometimes do not want to bring their domestic violence cases into the police, but they prefer to go to the court for a divorce. So yeah, the divorce can be settled both in religious court or in civil courts. Next slide, please. Okay, so where should we seek help? Please seek the expert to get counseling. In Houston, you have Nicole organization. And please report the case to the service providers who will accompany the victim to perform the legal process and the recovery process. You can report the case to the authorities if, as a victim, you choose to do the legal process. Sometimes the language of law are quite intimidating or hard to understand. So you should you should ask for legal aid from the service providers. Or you may go to the nearest safe house, and please disconnecting the relation with the perpetrator, especially if the perpetrators who keep repeating their actions. Yeah, sometimes you feel that you still love the perpetrators, or you think that, oh, he will be change his attitude. Okay, how many times you should have how many times you should bear the violence? Stop. Think rationally, disconnecting the relation, and keep moving with your life. Protect your legal documents and go to the nearest consulate general of the Republic of Indonesia. Next slide, please. This is some important notes for us. Domestic violence is a crime that causes harm. It's not about, it's not that, it's not that you make a mistake and you and don't think that you deserve to have a punishment because of your mistake. That's domestic violence. That's a violence, a crime. Yeah. And perpetrators of domestic violence will repeat their action in a form of a vicious circle that starting from the honeymoon period, then enter the stage of conflict, and then enter the stage of violence, and then sloping into a period of peace, back to honeymoon again, and so on. The duration between the honeymoon stage and the violent stage becomes shorter until it finally stops the vicious circles when the victim dies. Next. Victims of domestic violence need help from good service provider institutions to strengthen themselves, provide counseling to the families. If the perpetrator has a strong commitment to change his or her behavior, the family counselor may be helped. But please note this. However, in cases of domestic violence involving sexual violence against children and women, please never choose mediation as a solution. In Indonesia, there, there are some cases that in domestic violence involving sexual violence, the police ask the victim to have a mediation with the perpetrator. Please don't. We, yeah, women activists in Indonesia against the mediation in sexual violence cases. Yeah. In the case of domestic violence, the first step the victim needs to do is to strengthen herself, not only psychologically or physically, you should also have a strength in financially in order to recover. This strengthening process can be achieved through assistance from service providers. In some safe house in Indonesia, we find a program that also bring to the victims or to the survivor to uh, to strengthen them financially. So, yeah. The strengthen process is also important in order to deal with legal proceeding in cases that often takes time and consume energy and funds. Next slide, please. Okay, this is only a small notes about our experience in handling domestic violence cases in some rural areas in Indonesia. In some areas of Indonesia, especially in some rural areas, the police and village officials who have a pro-victim perspective, underline the pro-victim perspective, please, they will study the case carefully. If the case in the first time in that family, then the perpetrator will be asked to make a letter of agreement on sealed paper and witnessed by the family of both parties and police and religious or communal figures, tokoh masyarakat ya. The content of the agreement is that the perpetrator will not commit any more violence to the victim if the case is the first time. Okay, if the perpetrator then doing violence again, then he or she should be punished based on criminal law. Yeah. But again, the keyword is having pro-victim perspective and as the first time case. Next slide, please. However, if the reported violence is a recurring case or repeated case, the perpetrator will be directly processed by criminal law and supplemented by social sanctions or customary fines. So they not only proceed by criminal law, but also by customary law. They will be punished by social sanctions or customary fines if customary law is still strong enough in that area. In some area in East Nusa Tenggara, even no excuse for sexual violence perpetrator, especially if the victim is a child. I think that's the end of my presentation. I don't bring the conclusion or the closing remarks because I believe that we have a discussion that will enrich all of us. Thank you. I will give it back to the moderator. Terima kasih.
Thank
Oh,
you for
boleh dikasih slide terakhirnya yang ada bunganya untuk semua. Terima
give the
kasih.
flowers to everyone.
Iya.
So we will see the flowers.
Okay.
Yes. This is
Okay.
the
That's
flowers. Bunga apa
the
ini, Mbak?
flower.
What kind of flowers is this? Do you know?
Yeah, this is anggrek bulan. It's an orchid, Phalaenopsis. Yeah, yeah. Okay. I don't know the Latin names of the flower, but in bahasa Indonesia it's called anggrek bulan.
Do you have any meanings of it, or just the color? You just speak the color, the flowers that you like.
Yeah, this is my gift to you to make all of you cheer up today. Thank you. Terima kasih. Mau
Yeah,
ya,
thank you. Yes, that's very meaningful and also very rich elaboration, some of the cases in Indonesia. And there's a culture perspective, and also there is we are as a woman, and also in the situations of in the household, we have children too. And it's more complex than we thought. It's not only one single person as a woman. So next we have a wonderful speaker. Her name is Nicole Franklin Jones. She has been in AVIDA, which is Aid to Victims of Domestic Abuse, since 2014. She's a native Houstonian. Nicole holds a degree in child psychology from Texas Southern University and in art and organization management from University of Phoenix. Wow, this is very diverse experience background, different cultures as well, just like Indonesia. And she has been in having 30 plus years experiencing to work and founding community efforts. And also as the outreach director, she is dedicated to educating the community on the effects of domestic violence to end the intimate partner abuse for adults and youth. So Nicole, the floor is yours.
If I can, perfect. It was perfect timing. Let me share my screen real quickly. So again, thank you. I'm going to say good evening, and to some of you, good morning. The time change is incredible. Thank you once again, Ria, for inviting me to be a part of this presentation. It is always an honor to be able to talk about domestic violence. I'm going to start off with giving you a little history on AVIDA. AVIDA has been around for 40 plus years providing service in Harris County. And we are fortunate with an unfortunate situation to have expanded our services to several other counties throughout the Harris County district. AVIDA's mission is to end family violence by advocating for the safety and self-determination of all victims. However, although we know that the victims are the predominant client base of ours, we also have a responsibility to promote accountability for the abuser, as well as foster community-wide response to the community, which is huge for us here in Houston, because that's an opportunity for us to go out into the community and not only educate adults, but we also educate young adults on healthy relationships compared to unhealthy relationships. Breaking that cycle is huge, a huge mission of AVIDA. When we look at some of the progress and challenges, and I think that when we talk about domestic violence as a whole, you know, for a lot of us, we feel as though, where does it end? And so it's always important to talk about the progress, because we know the challenges has exist and will continue to exist. So what we know now, based on a lot of it is due to social media, women and men are speaking out like never before. And that's huge, because there was a time where domestic violence was a thing of shame, where people were ashamed to report it, where people were ashamed to discuss it, not only with others, but also within the content of their families. And so now we're saying that there is no reason for a victim to be ashamed of what the perpetrator is doing to him or her. Expectations are shifting regarding abusive behaviors. Now we're saying, instead of saying, why does she or he stay? Now we're saying, why does the abuser abuse? And how can we stop the abuser from abusing? And a lot of that is due to the Me Too movement, which for us is huge, because now we're making that paradigm shift and putting the accountability where it should be placed. And that is with the perpetrator and the abuser. Technology is both a blessing and a curse for us. Why? Because social media has created a platform for victims and organizations to be able to speak up and speak out about what is domestic violence and how we can go about educating our community on domestic violence, where resources are, and how to utilize those resources. And so for that reason, social media has been a huge progress for us, a huge success. However, the challenge here is now we also have to educate how to utilize social media and technology. One, because a lot of our stalking is created through social media. Perpetrators have understood that the way to destroy their victims, they don't necessarily have to be physically abusive towards them. They can do that through social media or through other forms of technology. So as a result of that, we have to make our victims aware of technology and how a lot of our perpetrators are using that. So holistically, yes, there's been a lot of progress when it comes to educating our victims, but we know there's a lot more work to do because the challenges do exist as well. When we look at what is the domestic violence, and it's in several of the presenters, they've explained this as well. Domestic violence is a systematic pattern of abusive behaviors used by one partner to maintain power and control over another partner in an intimate relationship. What we say is that there was a time where it was just what happened within the content of that home. But what we know now is more than just a family matter. Now it is a public health issue. And so because of that, it's important for us to go out and train other organizations on what to do, because we know that the perpetrator now, when they want to be able to get to the victim, they don't care what avenue they have to do so. And we're seeing a lot more of that in our media. They will do whatever they need to do to be able to get to that victim. There was a case in New York recently where the gentleman was so concerned about harming his victim that he didn't care that this woman even had his child. He approached this woman in public daylight and started stabbing her. He didn't care who was around or who it may have impacted, including his child. All he cared about was doing harm to that victim. And so because of that, we're seeing more and more of that in the media, and it's happening every single day. Now we have to understand that it's more than just a family matter, which is why the victim is so important for that victim to report. Now it is a public health issue. When we look at the different types of abuse that we focus on, because we know that it's not just physical and sexual abuse, and often enough, we educate our victims that it doesn't necessarily mean that the domestic violence is physical or sexual. Often enough, and it's been stated several times this evening, it could be emotional and mental abuse. It could be that technological abuse where I harass or stalk an individual using technology. Then we have spiritual abuse. That was one of the ones that I did not hear this evening, but it exists every single day, where a person utilizes spirituality to control that victim and maintain them staying within the content of that home. And we cannot judge an individual because we all have those different spiritualities and beliefs. And there's nothing wrong with that. Where it becomes a person becomes victimized by it is when a person utilizes their beliefs to control them. And there's a difference between spirituality and being victimized. And so because of that, we're constantly have to educate our victims on just exactly what spiritual abuse is. As the same for financial abuse, and some of the two new ones that we're seeing, immigration, threatening to deport or turn that individual in when they know that that person isn't legal in our country. And so we're seeing a lot of that, where a lot of our victims would say, I cannot report, because if I report, then I'm going to be deported back to my country. And we don't know what may have taken place in their country. And so the perpetrator is smart. They've utilized that as a weapon, a tool to be able to intimidate and threaten that victim to maintain and stay in that unhealthy relationship. And of course, then there's stalking. There was a time where, stalking was looked upon as something that was not as serious, that person was just having a difficult time breaking away from the relationship. And now we're out educating on everything that you see in this paradigm of types of abuse is something that we have to take serious, because domestic violence is just that. We cannot take for granted that any of these things are one less than the other. But it's also important when we talk about educating our victims, and that is the basis on what I'm discussing this afternoon. It's important to let them know that it necessarily does not mean that it's physical or sexual abuse, that it can start in any one of these different areas. So when I look at this power and control wheel, and I'm not sure if anyone has ever seen this, we call this wheel was the Duluth Project. This wheel was actually created from victims of domestic violence, and you can find it on any Google site. And we utilize this to educate our victims, but we also utilize this wheel when we're working with our perpetrators. The importance of this wheel is to teach individuals just exactly how power and control can be done within the content of an individual. The black ring in which you see that says physical and sexual, we call those arrestable offenses, because At one point in time, the perpetrator, that's exactly what he or she was doing. They were physically or sexually abusing their victims to gain that power and control over that individual. But what was interesting here is that the perpetrator got smart. The perpetrator said, I will no longer physically or sexually abuse my victim. I will utilize the things on the inside of this will because it wasn't evident to the police when they came out that the victim had been abused. So they stopped physically and sexually abusing them. And they start using things like intimidation. And intimidation, which is looking at that individual, throwing things at the wall, destroying things in the home, abusing pets, sitting weapons down, whatever it took, as long as it wasn't putting their hands on that individual to try to intimidate that person, to try to gain that power and control. Or it was that emotional abuse, telling that person they're less than. If there were children involved, if you walk out of this family, who else is going to want to be with you? They will use the family dynamics. You will disgrace our family if you walk out of this family. Whatever it took to emotionally control that individual, it's not as bad as you seem. Why would you walk out of this happy home? And so eventually the victim started believing in these things and started feeling guilty, and that therefore stayed in that unhealthy situation. Then there was isolation. A lot of our victims say it wasn't in the beginning of the relationship, it was gradual, where they would say things such as, your friends are not there for you. Your co-workers do not care about our relationship. They would remove family members gradually from their relationship. Whatever it took to remove that individual that served as a support to that individual, they would utilize whatever tools they needed to remove that individual, because if that person had no one to support him or her and they only had the perpetrator, then that was a way for them to gain that power and control over that individual. And you see, we're going through this cycle because, again, it doesn't necessarily mean it's physical or sexual. It could be any of these within this will. Minimizing, denying, and blaming. Saying statements such as, you made me do it. It wasn't my fault. You know how much I love you. This is not who I am. Making light of it. If you had not have done this, then I would have not have done that to you. If we minimize and deny and say that it wasn't even that serious, a lot of our victims mentally and psychologically start taking accountability for the abuse themselves instead of blaming the person who is the perpetrator. Or using children. I have 2 kids. I love them dearly. But imagine loving your kids and stating, if you walk away, you're breaking up our home. Telling them that a child that is 2, that they need their father, that you would be disgraced if you walk out of this home and take our children, or you can leave, but the children would have to stay in this home. Imagine someone threatening their children as a way to gain that power and control over them. Any mother or father that is in that abusive situation will stay for the sake of their children, power and control. Then there's that male privilege. For a lot of our females, they would say spiritually, that is one of the biggest ones, because in a lot of cultures, the man is the head of that household spiritually, and they're the dominant one. And we're not saying that that is not okay. Where it becomes okay if that person has not agreed to that level of being dominated by that individual. If that person says, you no longer have a voice, your voice has been stripped because I am the dominant person in this home, then at that point, we have to start looking at that as a red flag, as that person gaining power and control over that individual. And then, of course, we talked about financial, and that's that economic abuse. For a lot of our females, a lot of them have no control over the finances in their home. And there's nothing wrong with that if that's something that was conversated and it was agreed upon. But what we see is that a lot of our victims would say, I've never had control. I don't have any access to funding. I don't have any access to bank accounts. I'm told that I cannot go to work to be a part of that community. I have to stay at home and just do what that individual has said I'm supposed to do. And when we look at that, a lot of our victims are afraid to walk away, especially when they have children, because financially they cannot support themselves. And so it's a matter of educating And we're not telling anyone that their relationship is unhealthy, but knowledge we know is power. And then here's the last one, using coercive threats. Unfortunately, a lot of our perpetrators would do one or two things. Either threaten to do harm to the victim, and in some cases, they've even said that they would do harm to oneself if that person chooses to walk out of that relationship. We've even had perpetrators actually go to the extent of doing harm and trying to commit suicide in order for that victim to feel sorry for them and stay in that unhealthy relationship. So when you look at this will, I think this will is extremely powerful because, again, this will was actually created from victims who lived in a shelter who said, you know, they didn't know where the dynamics fell apart because the physical and sexual abuse was not there all the time. And so it's important for us to educate our victims that it doesn't necessarily have to be that. It could be anything in the content of this will. When we look at contributing factors versus causes, and this is what a lot of our perpetrators would utilize as a way to justify their behavior and their level of violence. They may state things such as, I was angry, I was using a substance, my environment, I had PTSD, I had stressors. Well, we know that every single day, especially with the pandemic that's happening now, that's a stress for all of us. But that does not give us a cause to go out and abuse anyone. And so this is really important because a lot of our victims would come in and justify why they were in this abusive relationship. And we do state these may be factors, but there's never a just cause for anyone to be in an abusive relationship and be abused. We know that 1 in 4 women would have experienced domestic violence in their lifetime, but it's also important to understand that 1 in 7 men will have experienced domestic violence within their lifetime as well, which is why it's so important for us to educate holistically, not only women about domestic violence, but also gentlemen as well. When we look at the cycle of violence, and this will, I love this will because it talks about why victims stay. And none of us are exempt from this will. When we look at the cycle of violence and we educate our young adults on this same cycle, every relationship starts this way, and once we get into the relationship, it can continue to be this way. And I think that it's important to understand that when we're in these relationships and we're talking to victims, to educate this throughout the journey of their relationship. We all start with the honeymoon when things are great and they're beautiful. For me, that was the best time of my life right there when I first met my spouse. I don't know about you. And then we get into that routine of calling that person in the morning, calling in the evening. It's beautiful. And we're excited. I see a narrator smiling because we've all been through it. And it's a beautiful time. But when that tension builds up and it changes for us, we tend to ignore it, or we try to excuse it away, or we start thinking, well, this person is really cute or fine, so I'm gonna go ahead and walk through the channels of it. And then that trigger kicks in. And then there's some level of abuse. May it be technological abuse where that person is blowing up your phone, or that person is calling you out of your name or belittling you. But then that person turns around and they excuse it. The abuse occurs, and that person's excuses that abuse away by saying, I apologize, I love you, I didn't mean it, I care for you. I'm not the only ones that experienced this in my lifetime. And so we have to understand that for a lot of us, and not all, it'll take a woman up to 7 times of going through this cycle before she decides to walk away. And unfortunately, a lot of our victims stay in this cycle for a lifetime because no one has educated them that this cycle occurs. Even those relationships that has occurred, and we have some that have people been married for 20, 30 years, this cycle can still occur. And so what I always say, when we get to the tension part, number 4, that is where conversation needs to begin. That is where counseling needs to start. Instead, for a lot of us, that's where we ignore it for fear of what would take place. And so then we ask ourselves, why do victims stay? Well, because of this cycle, for fear of what may happen if they walk away, Some of them would say, I just simply love this individual and I can't see myself with anyone but him or her, or hope that that person would change his or her behavior. For some, it's the financial dependency. For a lot, and I've heard this early on, pressure from family and friends and the abuser. For some of us, it's the faith belief. This is my faith. I cannot walk away. But even if it's your faith, that does not mean that you cannot get help or support for the situation. Or for some, it's low self-esteem or self-worth, and often created by the abuser, or just a lack of support, period. And mainly because the abuser have isolated all and any support system that she or he may have. So as a result, it's important that if nothing else, when you walk away, understand that this is a cycle of violence that traditionally not only occurs in adults, but it also is important to start educating our young adults that this cycle can exist. Because what we fail to realize is that for a lot of our young teens, they're experiencing this same cycle of abuse. On an average, a woman will leave an abusive relationship 7 times, once again, before she leaves for good. And we know, which is why we do safety planning, that a person is at a higher risk at that time of leaving their partner. 75% of murders at the hand of the intimate partner was when that individual made the decision to walk away. So as a result, AVIDA provides free safety planning, and I say that word because I think that's important for all of our victims to understand, where we actually walk them through a safety plan of everything that he or she needs prior to deciding to leave that unhealthy relationship. Some of those things may be just taking a picture of your marriage license, taking copies of your social security cards, including your children, making copies of your children's birth certificates. We tell a lot of our victims, if you would just take a picture and send it to a friend, save it to your Yahoo account or any type of account, so that if you have to walk away in an emergency, you have all of your important documents stored somewhere. So if you run into anyone that is in that situation, let them know that they're not alone. We have advocates that can help them create a safety plan so that they can walk away and walk away safely. Some of the warning signs: isolating a victim, extreme jealousy, someone that is possessive, accusing them of things constantly, like such as cheating, not being loyal in the relationship. They get mad when you talk to other people. They're extremely controlling. They make the victim check in and get permission to do anything. A lot of our victims will say, I felt scared, but I didn't know what that feeling was instinctively. Or they won't accept a breakup, or they're stalking. And this is a small list, but this is some of the things that we're seeing on a continuous basis that we consider to be red flags and are important to share with victims. So how do we help someone? We recognize, respond, and refer. We always say different signs: bruising, of course, broken bones, physical attacks, threats, using weapons, name calling, being disrespectful. A lot of victims would come and say, I didn't even realize I was in an abusive relationship, which was stated earlier, because no one ever educated them on what is healthy compared to unhealthy. A lack of freedom, controlling behaviors, once again, isolation or financial control. These are all red flags that I think that are important to share and continue to educate your community on, because if no one ever told them, then the perpetrator would continue to let them know that the relationship that they're in is what's considered a healthy relationship. Some of the things that we say are do's: it's important for all of us to understand how and why and we should listen, believe, and validate, show empathy and compassion, maintain confidentiality. We refer a lot of our clients to different professionals because we work with other organizations such as DIA here in Houston. We work with different shelters here in Houston because holistically we want to make sure that the victim receives any and every type of service that he or she may need. And we understand the importance of knowing our boundaries and making that victim feel safe within their situation, because we know that it's not easy seeking help when you are a victim of domestic abuse. We always say, tell a victim that they do not deserve this. And I think that's important. And I think that's the message that I heard across the board with every speaker this evening, that we do believe them, and that it's important for all of us to understand that we have a responsibility, and we share that with our victims to help them get the help that they need. So some of the things that we say we don't do is give advice. We don't judge or blame. We don't offer mediation or solutions. And we don't question their story or experiences, and we don't cross boundaries. Why? Because when you come to AVIDA, you're working with our attorneys. And keeping in mind, I'm going to talk about our services. Our legal services are 100% free. And we want to make sure that when our victims go to court, that they are understanding just exactly what they're getting themselves into. Because just as the victim is there to walk out of that situation, the perpetrator is there to keep them in that situation. We also talk about, and I put the link on there because I think it's important. I am a kid person. I understand the importance and the dynamics of working with our young adults. And so if you like, you can take a picture of where it says first impression video, because this video talks about the generational cycle of violence. And we know that violence is a learned behavior and a learned way of coping and trying to solve problems. And so not only are we working with the victim, but we understand that our young adults have been traumatized as well by this situation. And so because of that, we do go into the school systems and we educate school counselors, we educate parents on the impact that domestic violence can have on our young adults, more so in the womb before they were even born than a child who actually witnessed domestic violence. And so I know we're short for time, and so I offer the link to you, and I hope that any and everyone would just take time to look at the link so they can see the impact that it has on our young adults as well. So for AVIDA services, we do offer free legal representation to anyone who finds himself in a domestic violence situation. What that means is that as long as the perpetrator is not living, the victim is not living with the perpetrator, and they live with any of our counties for at least 90 days, or the abuse occurred within our counties within 90 days, we can help them with getting a free protective order, a divorce, child support, a custody modifications. Because often enough, we get a lot of victims that say, I've gone to court, but this has occurred and I need to modify my custody because I'm living in fear of this individual again. Those services are free. We also can provide safety planning for free, where we can help that individual create a plan so he or she can walk away safely without feeling threatened or harmed. We have crime victims compensation for victims so that once again, that financial threat will not be held over that individual's head. We work with that individual with different referral sources throughout Harris County, Fort Bend, and other counties that we work in. And one of the ones that I'm really proud of is our financial and tuition assistant. A lot of our victims would come to us and say, I would love to complete my education, but I'm short tuition because this individual refuses to pay for my education. Well, we can help with some tuition assistance to help allow that individual to be self-sufficient, whatever it takes to empower that victim so he or she understands that there is no just cause and no reason for them have to stay. AVIDA is there to support them in doing so. We offer counseling, individual as well as group counseling and therapy, not only for the victim, but also for their children to help them deal with the trauma that they have experienced so that they can live a better and healthy life. And all of these things are extremely important. We also work with the perpetrator in our battered intervention prevention program, which is an 18-week psychoeducational group. And so we get a lot of perpetrators that are mandated by court. And one of the things that we're very proud of is that when they do come to us and they're mandated by court, we do let the victim know that they are in our system and they are going through this program. One, because we want the victim to understand that this person is here. Yes, they're trying to get the help that they need, but they need to understand that that doesn't necessarily mean that they have to go back to that perpetrator. And so we offer holistically services to the entire unit of that home. We also go out to the schools and we educate young adults, because we cannot assume if a young adult grows up in an unhealthy situation that they know what healthy look like. And so we're talking about breaking that cycle of abuse. And so it is important to go out and start educating our young adults on what a healthy relationship is. Because if you grew up in an unhealthy relationship all of your life, then how do you know what healthy is? And so because of that, we're in the community educating adults, but also young adults. So we say bruises fade, but the pain can last forever. However, if a person get the help that they need, they can transition to a better life. So again, thank you for this opportunity. It has been an honor and a pleasure. And I do continue to look forward to working with each and every one of you in the near future. So again, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you for all of the three speakers. And of course, we have excited questions here. Maybe to Ibu Nana, yeah? Ibu Nana, because this is something to do related to a kind of like immigrations. So in terms of Indonesia, some of the women or many of the women still stay as Indonesian, and they get married with Americans and they have children as Americans. And somehow along the lines, you know, it happens. So for those folks that in that situation, Ibu Nana, sometimes the woman probably, or some other Indonesian probably as their partner, or maybe they can have a you know, American wife probably, so they get like an unhealthy relationship. So some of the status there, maybe their visa is not valid anymore, for instance, but they are still in a relationship and having children, or maybe some of them green card holder. So if that happened, what they should do? Should they just call 911, or should they go to Indonesian side? Maybe Ibu Nana can, you know, can elaborate more. And maybe for Nicole, before I forgot, if you share with us the number of domestic violence, is it like increased during the pandemic itself? So how many of them? So please, Bu Nana and Nicole.
Right, thank you very much, Miss Moderator. Well, if, for example, Indonesian women married with the American man, and then the wife is the victim of the abusive from the husband, then she can call our hotline contact of the consulate, and of course, as I told you before, she can come to our shelter. She can ask for the protection for her, and then this is a responsibility and the obligation of the Indonesian mission abroad to protect the safety of the Indonesian people. So in that case, if the Indonesian woman or the Indonesian wife experience the abusive act from the husband, and then they can report to us, and then we give a protection, and then we will also ask her whether what else she wants to do, whether she wants to report to the police, because we will also advise her to report to the police, and also document her what is it that you know, if there's a bruise or something, then she needs to be documented. Then that will be the evidence when to report to the police, and then also we will you know, follow up on that. This is sometimes a difficult case because it's not between Indonesian and Indonesian. And we also advise, we will also advise her to have a family lawyer. And then also she can discuss with the family lawyer what to do next to report to the court. Of course, when that happens, she can also call 911, because I believe 911 is not only for the U.S. Citizens, but to anyone who live in the state. Just correct me if I'm wrong, Nicole.
You're right.
So call 911 right away. Ask for help. Ask for the, you know, her to him or the police to come right away to have your life. And then after that, as Nicole advised, I think it is just the same case, and the consulate will be ready to give the assistance for that. Yes.
So with the note, we're still staying with the same topic, since you know, maybe Nicole and Ibu Nana can tap in with this situation. Is it true if somebody, let's assuming that they are maybe like overstay, so they are not really having a paperwork together. So does it mean the police will share the immigration status? How about that?
So there was a time where a lot of victims were afraid to call the police for that reason. Fortunately, we've had an opportunity to start educating our HPD officers and our judges that that should not be a factor. And so we always tell a lot of our victims, go ahead and continue to call. Police are not to arrest them because they have called the victim. And so a lot HPD here in Houston do know that if someone calls, despite their legal status, they have a right to get the help that they need. So we still want to make sure that they call and get the support and help that they need.
So
Sure,
for
Nicole,
yeah.
regardless their status as staying here, I believe 911 and the police here will protect and also will help whoever report to them. And then after this, because when you talk about the status, is a different thing. Is a different thing. So whatever the status you have for the Indonesian, then you have to call 911. You have to report to the police, and then also get the strong evidence. So the police later on can file to the suit. Yeah.
And
Yeah,
we always let them know, a lot of our victims know, because they're afraid to report because they would say it was emotional, it was financial, and it wasn't physical. But often enough, that's because they don't know how to define what physical abuse is. It doesn't necessarily mean that a person has put their hands on them. It could be that they blocked them. It could be that they spit on them. It could be several ways to define physical as well as sexual abuse. And so what we ask our victims is just, no matter what, report, report, report. Even if they feel though it's not as serious as they think it is, that's for us to determine. That's for our attorneys to determine, not for the victim to determine.
Yes, so in this our excited webinar, I want you to know that we have audience probably from Australia. So we are from different continents for some reason, even though we have different time zones. And I think some of Rosihan Saragi, I think the question has been answered by Nicole. She's asking about the stalking. I think you covered that on your presentations. And I want to go to the one of the scenario, maybe this is for Nicole and also Inge. There is situations, not the victim, but the person who witnesses. So she said, I know a lady got bruises on her eyes 2 times, but she did not want to admit that her boyfriend hit her. So the question is, can I report it to the police? So from Indonesian law or maybe from US law, how does it work?
So I know for us, and we call that bystanders, they can call and report it. However, when the police go to that home, unless that victim is willing to stand up for him or herself, there's absolutely nothing that the police can do. And so one of the things that we always say is, if you share our information, because you got to understand that person may not be at a place where they're able to walk out of that situation, and they may not know the resources that exist. For a lot of our victims, we tell our bystanders, share the information with them, but maintain appropriate boundaries. And the reason being is because that bystander can also become a victim of that perpetrator. And so we want to be mindful of protecting not only the victim, but the bystander as well. And so even if they call, that call needs to be an anonymous call, but they cannot walk over and make the assumption that that person will report or walk away.
So maybe Mbak Inge untuk yang Indonesia kira-kira bagaimana, Mbak?
Okay, so in Indonesian, before 2016, it's hard for in this case, it's hard for the person that know that her or his close friend or the family who be a victim of the violence, domestic violence, to report to the police, because the police sometimes ignore it. The police still push the victim to report by herself or by himself. But right now, seems that the police change their perspective. So if there is a report from other people that as a witness that witness the domestic violence, they can receive the report, and they have they have a investigation through the case. Jadi sekarang udah bisa itu polisi sekarang akan apa namanya menindaklanjuti itu. The police will follow up the report in Indonesia. Yeah.
But Maitri, may I also add something?
Sure.
Yeah. Well, there is a good recommendation, or there is on the chat from Ibulia from New York. Even the victim can apply for U visa. So this is another interesting things. So regardless what the status of the victim, I think there's also a chance for the victim to apply for the U visa. So it's a kind of a special treatment from the U.S. For the victim of the violence. Another things that I'm going to say is on the chat, what about if it is unlegal marriage? This is a very weak position for the women, I think, because you are not registered. In Indonesia, we call it like a nikah siri. You are not registered, you don't have a legal document. So as a woman, I think you have to ask your husband to marry you legally. Otherwise, when something happened with your marriage, you abuse or something, you are in a weak position. You are very weak. You cannot claim anything. But of course, only like what you say, Pa Yuli tadi. Yudi or Yuli? Yudi, yeah. So it is the advantage of the man. Yeah. But then as a women, we are in a very weak position. So I encourage to have a legal marriage then.
Right.
Can
And
I
that's
also
the same
add,
here in Houston.
okay. Can I also add
Sure.
the answer? Yeah. For the Payudi's question about unregistered marriage, in Indonesia, in some area, the police received the report about the domestic violence in unregistered marriage cases. But when the cases will bring to the court, sometimes the judge don't allow the case by the act of domestic by the act of the domestic violence elimination, because the judge don't think that unregistered marriage is not a marriage. So we found it's hard to bring it to bring that kind of case to the court. Thank you.
Ibu, I think in the chat there is Ibu Lia Sunda, our immigration lawyer. Ibu Lia, would you explain about the common law marriage? Can you show up, Bu Lia, please?
Maybe bisa di-unmute kali ya.
Minta dibantu, Bu Lia. Sunda, yes. Okay, Mbak.
Okay, Mbak.
Hi. Yeah.
Hi. Aduh, I'm not really ready. I was just texting because Budana is a dear friend of mine, and then I just sat down, and this is a pretty awesome panel. And I wish that we could do more of these conversations here. I just would like to emphasize on a couple of things. But the first thing is that family matters, so to speak, according to the U.S. Constitution, the Commerce Clause, which is Article 1, Section 8. It basically says that the states actually has the power to regulate whatever is going on within the state. So therefore, whatever is going on will be regulated within the state. And immigration is a federal matter. That's number one. So then you have an argument from both sides. And I'm so sorry, I look very awful on the camera.
You look still beautiful.
And then the second thing is that common law marriage is also a defense. It's an uncommon remedy, but Texas is actually one of the last states that actually recognize common law marriage. So even if it's nikah siri, but it is possible that after a certain period, if I'm not mistaken, because I don't practice in Texas, I practice solely immigration law, 18 years. But even if you are not legally married, if you could prove that you have been holding out as a husband and a wife for a certain period of time, then that marriage would hold up in court. I think it's 6 months, Nicole. Is that, am I correct?
Yes, that's what I was going to state. That's
Right.
why
And
we
then
encourage them to get a protective order, because
right.
the perpetrator in some cases will make an effort to remove all of that documentation to prove that they have been legally living together.
Right. Since I do immigration law, what I usually say to my clients is that I always tell them to keep a separate box with things that could get burned, destroyed, whatever, out of reach. So then it's you either could, I mean, these days, like what you mentioned, I think somebody mentioned put it in cloud and things like that. But that's all. So, and then there's always AVIDA and there's VAWA. There are restrictions for it. This is not the topic of this conversation here, but I'm only here to support my friend Ibu Nana. So, and then also my other friend Ibu Dian, which is somewhere here. So I'm gonna hide my camera again after this.
Thank you, Mbak Leah, for your further explanation, because I think it's very important also for everyone to know that I'm not aware myself that Texas practice the common marriage law, but good to mention that. So it's like provoking us that we have to learn about that also. If there is a case about that, at least we know as an Indonesian consulate what to do. And thank you, Mbak Leah.
Yeah, so this is a very interactive discussions, and I like all of the chat is filling up all of these questions. So there is a case, the questions from Butet. I think everyone knows Butet. Butet lives in Maryland now. She used to be in Texas area. Butet, she is asking about how if the woman reporting the case, can they trust the police? And if the other scenario is if the abuser report to the police, vice versa. So what is the what are the options for the woman?
I think that the victim can trust the police. I think that here in Texas, the police are a lot more aware of domestic violence and how to identify domestic abuse and what to do. I will say this though, that a lot of perpetrators, again, it's about manipulation, that they know that the victim will not call on them. So as a result, they end up calling on the victim. We've seen cases where a lot of our victims are simply defending themselves against the perpetrator because they've had just about enough of the abuse. And it's unfortunate, but then that perpetrator will turn around and call the police on that victim, and that victim will end up getting arrested for that abuse. That would be the only negative thing that I would say, because when the cops do come out and they ask the victim what took place and the victim said, I've been abused, a lot of the cops won't believe them in that sense because they didn't immediately report. The perpetrator was the one who reported.
So in that note though, still in the family situation, is spanking children, is spanking our own kid considered as abuse? Maybe what is in the US and what is Mbak Inge, maybe you can tap in Indonesia cases.
Well, I would say in Texas, abuse is abuse. I guess it's how it's defined. When we leave marks on our children, and for any of our children who go to school and you leave visible marks on an individual child, then yes, we have to report that. We're mandated to report that to Children Protective Service.
And untuk Mbak Inge, untuk yang di Indonesia, kalau mukul anak gitu kan suka tuh biasanya like to spank gitu kan, ya itu untuk mendisiplinkan, to discipline our kids. So how is in the context in Indonesia nowadays? When I was growing up, I saw it very common. So but then I was a kid, right? So I feel like maybe I was bad, like it was a bad, the kids doing something bad, and here in the US we have a time out, right? But then in Indonesia, I discipline my kids. This is my kids, So in Indonesia gimana sekarang, Bu?
Yeah. Yeah, actually in Indonesia we have the Act of Child's Rights Protection, and it forbids to corporal punishment. Yeah, one of the articles. But still, in some area in Indonesia, we still practice. Not we, but Indonesians still practice the corporal punishment as a part of discipline the kids, especially. I think in some schools also. Yeah, in some schools, the teachers still use the corporal punishment. For example, spanking or beat the child. Yeah. But in I yeah, for some family that raise that actually aware that the spank is spank, it's a part of the violence. I think they also in some families, some young families not right now, they use the time out for discipline the kids. So yeah, it's but it's still yeah. Okay.
So thank you. So there is another questions from, I think this is from Dian, something to do related to the social media. There is a circling around nowadays in Facebook or Instagram about sign language. Sign language, a woman showing a sign language of I am in danger. So I don't know whether you follow that social media, and can we use that as a, is that true? Can we use a sign language to, to give a sign, if somebody having in trouble?
Of course. Yeah, of course. It doesn't make a difference how they communicate. I mean, I've done presentations where they are using sign language to interpret my presentations. And that was one of the things that we discussed. That they have different signs and signals that they eliminate to show that they've been in an abusive situation. And we do take that into consideration.
Ya, untuk kalau di Indonesia gimana Bu, Mbak Inge? Di Indonesia kalau dengan pakai bahasa isyarat nih, kan supaya nggak ketahuan tuh. Jadi semuanya pakai bahasa isyarat dengan tangan atau gerakan seperti itu untuk memberikan pesan seperti itu. Kira-kira bisa disosialisasikan suatu mekanisme seperti ini atau bagaimana? Mbak Inge di unmute dulu, minta tolong. Ya lupa, di rewind ya, di rewind.
Okay. Yeah, actually, I don't find any cases with a sign language right now in the social media, but in some cases they only upload their pictures or their videos with the bruise, okay, or they write some or they quote some poet from other person that show there are the victim in the depression condition, or to show everybody in the social media that they have violence. But yeah, I think that's not it's common now in the youngest generation of women in Indonesia. They upload their pictures or videos that show the bruise or the wound, to show that they have a violence from their spouse. Jadi,
So maybe, yeah, so sign language can be happen, and maybe we can see as the new way to be. Well, the reason why I very close here to Galaudet, which is like we have the sign language everywhere, even like in some coffee shops. So at the front of my house, they're gonna be like a pizza, and they're gonna hire a lot of people with the sign language. So maybe I can learn too in the future. So maybe ini the last one ini dengan Ibu Nana. There's a questions about statistic, if you can provide us, or maybe refer to some website, because sometimes the numbers can be changing. Is there any statistic numbers, domestic violence happening for Indonesian women in US in general, or maybe in Texas specifically for Indonesian? Or maybe if Nicole can have some of this data, or maybe if people can refer to some websites. So silakan Ibu Nana.
Thank you, Mbak. I don't have any data for US in general. I have one, of course, I have some data. The cases that the consulate take care. We have one, Pak Brobo in Texas, happened in December 2019. So now she got divorced, I believe, and then she went back. Yeah, she went back to Indonesia because she got abused by the husband. So she decided to get divorced, and we gave her shelter in the consulate, and then we facilitated communication with the family, and then she decided to go home to Indonesia. So from 2017, while I've been here until today, there is only one case in Texas. The rest, I don't hear. I heard, but that person didn't report it to us. So it's impossible. We just only hear the gossip like that. It's impossible to interfere and also to get the data for that. As far as they got ask for help and also call us right away, we will follow it up, and then we will communicate with her, and then as much as possible, if she needs some shelter, we give her shelter and facilitate and talk with the family at home, and then of course ask what she wants to do next, whether she wants to sue the husband or not, or she just want to have a kind of she decided herself to, you know, don't want to have any relation anymore, and then go back to Indonesia. That's what we have in general. Well, I think we have to maybe Nicole has a data.
So I just, in the chat room, I just typed in an organization that we work with, that we have seen Indonesians who come through and who report domestic violence. And so a lot of them go through a program, an organization called DAYA, and I just included their contact information on there. And we work closely with them. One, because they're more familiar culturally with DAYA. And so because DAYA does the counseling part of it, we do the legal part. So we work hand in hand as a family and work with one another to make sure that holistically they get those services. So I included
is DAYA in, sorry, excuse me. Is DAYA in Houston or in Texas, Nicole?
It's in Houston.
Oh, in Houston. Okay.
Yes,
maybe I can get a contact number later then.
Yeah, I just added one onto the chat line.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So this is last question before we wrapping up. This is very exciting moment because everybody is participate and I have a lot of questions. So I would like to address these questions to Nicole, and also maybe Mbak Inge can get some updates. So this is from Pak Yudi. In Indonesia, in Jakarta cases, if there is no cases like wounded or bruises found, what happened is the police are going to do mediation between the victim and the abuser. So that at one point, you know, the victims get disappointed because, you know, it's not what to be expected. And how about in the US practice? And maybe if Mbak Inge after that can tapping in and adding if there is any updates.
So we got a lot of police officers go and there is no physical or sexual abuse that is present. And so a lot of our victims will state that this has not occurred. However, there's a thing called threat. There's a thing called intimidation. There's a thing called living in fear. And so we still tell the victim, if the police come out, let them know that I am living in fear of this individual. This individual has threatened me, you know, because that person, just because there is no physical proof, a lot of our police officers will try to come out and mediate, but we empower that victim to still let them know that they are in immediate danger of that victim. And so for that reason, that person needs a protective order. There was a time where police officers did not take that into consideration and they tried to mediate. However, what happened is that once they leave, that victim end up losing his or her life. And so as a result of that, tell them just because there are no physical marks, still make the police report, still file charges on that individual. Do not allow the lesson of marks to be a deterrent on them staying in that unhealthy situation.
Ya, maybe Mbak Inge bisa tambahin ada update kalau korbannya nggak kelihatan ada bruise, ada luka seperti itu. Polisi kemudian dia buat mediasi aja nih. Jadi antara yang jadi korban sama yang abuser itu juga jadi ketemu gitu. Dan kebanyakan korban merasa kecewa ya. Artinya kan bagaimana udah takut segala macam harus duduk sama-sama. Kira-kira perkembangan terakhir gimana, Mbak?
Okay, so in some cases, when the police try to mediate the victim and the abuser, if the women's NGO know about the cases, they try to save the victim, they provide the legal aid, and they put the victim into their cover. So in the process, the victim will be represented by the NGOs, and then the NGOs commonly the NGOs advise the victim to stop the police to stop the process in the police and then go through the court for the divorce to get the divorce process. So yeah, because based on the experience, we realized that police still think that the violence should be proved by the wound, physical wound, or by the bruises. So to stop so it's to save the energy of the victim, go through the divorce. Okay, itu.
In a lot of our counties here in Houston, like I live in Fort Bend, which Harris County and Fort Bend is very similar to the same. It doesn't make a difference if a police is called out on domestic violence, someone has to go. And so most counties here, they don't even question whomever called on that individual will be taken to jail. And so that's a safety measure for HPD officers.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. This is for Ibu Nana, yeah. There is a recommendation and appreciation of this event. A lot of Indonesian community will appreciate about this webinar. It's very important. And it happens during your time as the counselor in Texas area in Houston. So, you know, as the officer, you're probably going to be moved somewhere and somebody stepping in, you know. Is there any efforts that, you know, there's a support group for the community, especially Indonesian related, maybe related to the somebody like Nicole or maybe somebody like Dr. Inge, because Inge is having a clinics too practicing in Jakarta. Is there a way that, you know, Indonesian community here in the US can get support system? How does it work? I just throwing an idea and no pressure, Ibu Nana.
Yeah, all right. Oh, well, thank you very much. I also saw from the chat. Thank you also, Butet, for your appreciation for this webinar. Well, this is something that we have to educate everyone in the United States. I think we need the kind of a support system or support group or support Indonesian diaspora community to respond to this kind of situation. IDN chapter Houston is already having this initiative with the Consulate General Republic of Indonesia in Houston. Probably after this, we need to discuss what next, because this is very important. At least the first thing we have to do, of course, we have to bring awareness. Bring awareness to Indonesian community that can be happen, that can happen to any women, any Indonesian woman who live in the United States. And then if it happened, what should we do? What does the community do, or what can the community contribute to support? Of course, in the government side, as I said earlier, one of our priorities in diplomacy is giving a protection to Indonesian citizens. So this is the protection of the Indonesian citizens. But then psychological support or other support, I think we need also the community, Indonesian community, to be aware and also to do something. So it will be together with the government and also with the community to do it. Sometimes they don't want to report to us because they're ashamed. The other thing, because of the legal status, or the visa status, and then they only talk among themselves, and then sometimes, it will be a rumor, and then we cannot do anything. But I think I would like to thank Nicole as well. At least you already introduced to us that there is your organization at VA and also DAYA that can be working together with us to support the system. We also have some lawyers here like Leah or Pak Harun that we can ask some consultation or advice in terms of legal advice, what to do. So it's a great opportunity to bring up this topic today, especially during COVID. This is very alarming as we see from the data. We have to make it again and again the topic of this, and bringing to other Indonesian community to make awareness first and educating our people as well.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Bunana. Before I handing over to MC, I would like to have Nicole and Ibu Inge. Thank you for waking up in the morning, because it's 6 a.m. in Indonesia. I know in US culture, 6 a.m. no way, I will stay in bed, right, Nicole?
That's right.
So we do this because we are women, across the globe, across the continent.
Yes.
So to conclude of our nice discussions and sharing knowledge and experience, maybe we can start with Nicole. What is your message to the women, all women's, whoever that dealing with daily life, and also Ibu Inge, pesannya apa nih buat seluruh perempuan yang mungkin merasa sendirian dan berpikiran saya ini selalu lemah, I would like a very weak gitu loh. Tapi apa nih kalau if you can step forward and then do your best, what are the beautiful things? Maybe I can give to Nicole first and then Ibu Inge, ya.
So I close with a message that I think it's important to understand why we need to break the cycle of abuse, that everyone deserves to be in a healthy relationship. Everyone deserves the right to live safely, not only with their children, but with oneself. And then not to be afraid to step up and step out and share. They are a voice. You are a voice. And you deserve everything that you can ever want in a healthy relationship, not only the individual, but also their children. And just know that there are services out there. There are services out there that support you, that will walk you through the process, and that you're not alone. So anyone that needs help to understand not only what a healthy relationship is or how to be safe and get out of a unhealthy relationship, just know that AVIDA, which stands for Aid to Victims of Domestic Abuse, and other organizations in Houston are there for them to support them. So again, thank you for this opportunity.
Silakan Mbak Inge.
Okay, baik. Thank you. I think it's important for us as women to realize that we are not alone, that you can find a sisterhood in every place. If you feel that sometimes the condition in your family perhaps it's not quite good, but you can still have a sisterhood from every woman in this world, if there's not too much. And also think that your struggle to move from the vicious circle of the violence is not only important for you, but also for your children. It can show them that they are deserve to love and to be free. And also it's important for other women so they can learn how to get the freedom and how to struggle. Thank you.
So not police, for our dear Ibu Nana, I know you are as a woman and also a diplomat as well, but you are still a woman, a mother, and a wife in a family. And I know you work even overnight when Indonesian citizens or Indonesian even like calling you and then asking you, you always be there. And we are so great to have you in here and having this initiative. So thank you for hosting this, and also for your staff, working together. And women is not only your one issues, as you know, as being diplomats in the country. So I would like you to have conclusion before we hand it over to diaspora. Please, Ibu.
Thank you very much, Mbak Maitri, and also for IDN, Pak Zain, and also Ibu Ria, and all the participants who joined in. I think this is an alarming time for us to wake up as a woman, to be aware our rights, and also speak up if you feel like you're being abused. The consulate and Indonesian missions is always ready to give the assistance. Thank you, Mbak. So please, all the women in the US be united to respond to this kind of violence. Thank you again, Mbak.
Ya, silakan Ibu Ria ya, dan Pak Zain bisa kembali muncul.
Pak Zain duluan, silakan.
Very good discussion. I mean, thank you very much to Ibu Nana, Nicole, and Ibu Litwina, for the sharing the knowledge, about domestic violence. I think I'm pretty sure everybody will get benefit, from this discussion. So yeah, moving forward. So I think we will, try to learn something, in case we find domestic violence maybe in our friend or in our family. So yeah, we can do action, based on the information that everybody share in this discussion. Okay, thank you very much, especially for Indonesian Consulate, for all the speaker, and also Mbak Metriana and Buria, to conduct this session, and highly appreciate for this. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. So I guess sekarang I have to close. So I know it was very awesome. Thank you so much, Nicole, for your patience. I've been bothering you, and thank you, Mbak Eda Metrini, and Mbak Inge. Terima kasih. Thank you in Jakarta. Terima kasih juga buat Ibu Nana. And then terima kasih juga buat Mas Zain untuk kepercayaannya untuk to bring this topic, ya. And then saya tidak mau lupa, I don't want to forget. Thank you also for Ibu Romana Sirait. Ibu Romana, mana? Where's your picture there?
Yeah, and there is also Bu Romana, Bu Ardin.
Coba wajahnya keluar, dimunculin dulu wajahnya, minta
Let's
tolong.
take a picture together. Show your face then. It's for our documentation.
Okay, siapa yang ambil?
Okay, we will take a picture from the consulate. Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
the first page. Show your face, please, everyone.
Yeah,
And
the video on.
Nicole, is there any sign how to respond with this violence? Or we just do like this, or laugh, or no?
What is the sign language, Nicole?
We should laugh then. Okay.
In Indonesia, that we just do this.
Oh,
Just do this one. Okay, let's everyone do like this. Stop for the violence against women.
Yeah.
First photo, the first page. Finish? Yes? Okay, now we go to the second page. Please put your hand like this. Everyone show your face, please.
Second page.
Yes. Take a picture. 1, 2, 3. Yes, got it. The third page, is there any third page? Okay, it's finished. Thank you. And also I appreciate the men who joined this program as well, because this is not only the concern of women, but this is everyone's concern there. Yes, thank you.
Terima kasih, thank you semuanya. Stay tuned. We're gonna have the next domestic violence with the, different speakers or institution. Maybe we will bring what they call spiritual leaders, or a lawyer. But yes, all I can say is thank you so much for everybody, and then have a great the rest of evening or morning. Have a blessed weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you Pak Probo, Pak Budi, saya lihat ada Pak Yudi. Yang laki-laki semua yang joinin, terima kasih banyak Pak Susilo Suprobo, Pak Probo ya tadi ya. Pak Budi, siapa lagi? Pak
Thank you,
Kerry,
thank
ya. Terus siapa lagi nih Pak Yudi tadi sudah talk in the chat. Ya Pak Budi di mana Pak tinggalnya?
Saya di Jakarta, Bu.
Oh Bapak dari Jakarta.
Ya, saya
Oke.
temannya Pak Zen, teman sekolah.
I see. Ya. Terima kasih Pak sudah join
Thank you.
pagi-pagi. Ada lagi yang laki-laki? Oke. Alright. Thank you
Luar biasa
semuanya.
kalian.
Ibu yang dari Jakarta, terima kasih banyak. Sudah bangun pagi-pagi. Ya.
Terima kasih.
Ada Pak Rosihan juga di sini, Derry. Ya. Oke. Kita live ya. Oke, bye.
Terima
Sampai
kasih.
ketemu lagi.
Sampai jumpa.
Moderatornya terima kasih banyak-banyak.
Dimitri, terima
Iya,
kasih.
Ibu.
Thank you everyone.
Happy weekend
weekend.
everyone.
And everyone. Bye.
Bye.